Well, let me say good afternoon to each of you, and welcome to our biweekly press briefing. I want to take this time today to report on the good progress, or what I think is good progress, that we've made with our unions, our organized labor that represent District of Columbia government employees, and provide more details about the pay raise that I've included in my fiscal year 2014 budget proposal. I think you will recall that back in February in the State of the District address, I talked about trying to do right by our workforce, the people who we call on again and again to make sure that our city runs well. They keep us safe, they respond to emergencies, they get the snow off the street, which I guess they haven't had too much snow to get off the street recently, but that's not a bad thing either. They pick up the trash, they keep our children safe and getting them to school, and so many other jobs that contribute immeasurably to the quality of our lives. Nonetheless, in many cases, these dedicated public servants have not had raises in years. Some of them have not had a raise in as long as 7 years, and we're trying to rectify that. So today, I'm proud to report on the progress that we've made on my commitment to provide raises that include reaching new work agreements that are updated to meet the demands of a 21st century government and a 21st century workforce. My administration is making good on my commitment to reward city employees with a long overdue pay raise of 3% effective this month for the district's largest bargaining units, and that largest one, I guess, is Comp 1 and 2, which would be about 9,000 employees. The 3% raise will be the first installment of a 12% salary increase over 5 years, over, I guess, 4 years. 4 times 3 is 12, right? We've completed 8 collective bargaining agreements that cover almost 13,000 employees. They represent more than half of the union workforce. And the raises will apply to union and non-union employees alike. So this will also benefit the nearly 10,000 non-union district employees for a total of just about 23,000 employees who now will be covered immediately with the raises. I think that represents around 70% of all the district government employees who will be covered with what we're announcing today. And let me acknowledge that there are some agreements that are still in various stages of negotiation, and we intend to work to try to resolve all of the outstanding contracts in a way that is fair to our workers, fiscally responsible for district taxpayers, and meets budgetary marks. I am delighted that the city's growing economy and expanding tax base makes it possible to fund the $56 million cost for the raises, as well as fund all current pension liabilities. I want to thank our city administrator, Alan Liu, who has worked magnificently in order to be able to make this happen. Thank you, Alan. And the director of our Office of Labor Relations and Collective Bargaining, Natasha Campbell, who works tirelessly also. Natasha. And, of course, all of our union partners for working together to help us be able to get to this announcement today. I also want to thank the union's chief negotiators, and they are, first of all, Tommy Ratliff, who is just to my left here, who's with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Local 639, right, Tommy? Shana Frost with the Attorneys Union, that's AFGE Local 33. Vanessa Dixon, is Shana here? No. What about Vanessa Dixon? I don't see Vanessa either. Anyway, Vanessa Dixon, who's the chief negotiator for the Committee of Interns and Residents. They are the medical interns and residents that provide valuable service to the Department of Mental Health, in particular, that will become October 1st the new Department of Behavioral Health that will combine the Department of Mental Health with APRA, the agency that deals with substance abuse. They will become combined into the Department of Behavioral Health. Lisa Wallace, who's the chief negotiator for the SEIU, representing the social workers at the Department of Mental Health. Cynthia Perry of the National Union of Hospital and Healthcare Employees, and of course Gio Johnson, who is the executive director of AFSCME District Council 20. Gio actually served as the chief negotiator for the chief negotiators. He was the chief negotiator for all of the for the coalition of unions, I guess I might say. Involved comp units 1 and 2 that I mentioned earlier. The Office of the State Superintendent of Education, AFSCME Local 1959. The Department of Mental Health and AFSCME Local 2095, and AFGE Local 383. DMH and AFSCME 3758, which is a psychologist, and then there are others that we're continuing to work with. We are right now in the process of preparing the completed 8 compensation agreements for approval by the Council of the District of Columbia. They will be submitted to the Council next week, right, Mr. City Administrator? Okay. For those agreements that remain unresolved, we will continue to negotiate in an effort to reach an equitable agreement that works for all parties. I hope that all of our D.C. government employees, whether or not we have reached an agreement with their union, will see the raises we are announcing today as an expression of our good faith and commitment to ensuring all of our workers get raises. To the employees who are in a union not covered by the agreements we are announcing, please know that we are working hard to get you the raises that we believe you deserve as well. Again, I want to thank all of our union partners who are working with us, those who have completed agreements and those that are continuing to negotiate with us. I want to thank every one of you. And now I want to bring up a gentleman who I've enjoyed working with. He and I co-chair the Labor Management Partnership Council, which will later today hold its 6th meeting. We now have a strategic plan that we've developed. We're focusing on 2 issues, employee morale and customer service. And I have not been to a meeting yet where you could not find really dozens of people who have shown up. In fact, we often meet in this room, and this room has become too small to be able to hold the LMPC in. So again, I want to thank him for his leadership over many, many years in the District of Columbia. I want to thank him for his partnership in helping us to reach agreements, and someone who has the district in his heart because he is a native Washingtonian. Please join me in welcoming Gio Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning to my colleagues and all you special guests. In 39 years as a labor representative, I've come across a lot of mayors. I've worked all over the country. But this is the first mayor that I've run into that was a mayor about his word. First one that I've come into that said what he was going to do and did it. You know, it's not often that you meet those type of people. And when you meet them, you better be glad that they were a part of your life. Like I said, 39 years I've worked for this union. I've worked with probably every political person that you've heard about in the last 39 years. But Mayor Gray has been one that has stood up and said he was going to treat people in a fair and equitable manner. And he did that. You know, every time you see us together, we may not agree on everything, but it's not too many things that we don't understand to help move this city forward. And that's what our major concern has been about. When he made a commitment to make sure that public employees were treated fairly, he meant that. Hasn't crawfished once on that proposal. And I'm just proud that I can serve with him on any stage to ensure that labor as a whole meets its commitment to give 100% to government because we have one intent, and that's to service the citizens of the District of Columbia. You know, a lot of times we forget what our intent is, and we have one intent. That's the citizens of the District of Columbia. So when you got a mayor that took and turned the whole labor management partnership totally around, stepped up to the plate and said, we're going to do some positive things, then it made a difference. We have a labor relations office that's stepping up to the challenge. We have a city administrator, like I said, he's another one that I've worked with city administrators all over this country. But he's one of the few that I can pick up the phone at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, or get a call at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and say, what the hell is going on? But it's good, because the intent has been about one thing: making this the best city in the world. I'm proud of this city. These folks that run this city, my colleagues, many of you that's standing in this room, help make this the best city in the world, and I'm just thankful to be a part of it. So I thank you, Mayor Gray, and your staff, and we just continue our path down this road to keep it a positive attitude and working relationship. We thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It has been a real pleasure, frankly, to be able to work with UGO and all of your colleagues as we work to try to move the city forward. We did make some commitments. We've tried to fulfill those commitments. The Labor Management Partnership Council was one of those, which, when I was on the council, I remember the frustration that you all expressed about that, and we've now tried to restore that. We're meeting not just quarterly, we're now meeting every 2 months. Because we have so much work to do, and people are participating and I think enthusiastic about the opportunities to move forward. Doesn't mean, as you said already, doesn't mean that every problem we agree on the solution, but we have agreed on an environment within which we will work together to find solutions, and we've been able to do that thus far. So why don't we open it up for questions on this subject, Mark, on this.
I understand that these employees are going to get raises. I think anybody's had employees get raised. But you're fully aware, Mr. Mayor, more than half of the employees of the District of Columbia don't live in the District of Columbia. And their tax dollars go to Maryland, Virginia, wherever they live. Is it still the stated goal of your administration to have a residency requirement for D.C. government employees?
Well, you know how difficult that is. We've had numerous conversations about that. There were efforts to impose a residency requirement for district government employees. The city was sued, and the city lost in that. If there's a way that we can find, if there's a way we can find to do that, I'd be happy to do that, recognizing that some of our positions actually are not easily filled with the potential candidate pool being only people who live in the District of Columbia. The other thing that's important to me, which we are working on, and that is to be able to prepare the people who live in the District of Columbia for the jobs, especially those that are being created in the District of Columbia. So it isn't just necessarily imposing a requirement. It's saying that now we have such an increasingly large candidate pool that we can fill these jobs, with people who live in the city.
The police and fire department, there are great disparities between city residents and the composition of that.
Yeah.
Do you have more concern about, and for EMS, people who don't live in the city who are doing those very, very essential services?
Of course, I mean those are public safety jobs that are critical, and there are incidents that occur where you want to have your public safety workforce immediately available to you.
West Virginia, something like the disaster that happened in Boston. I've even heard anecdotally someplace in Florida, the idea of those public safety people living so far away from where
it makes it a challenge. There's no question about that. In fact, we have only 25% of our firefighters actually live in the District of Columbia, 19%. So it's roughly 1 out of 4, or 1 out of 5 in both instances. And we'd like to increase those percentages. You know, when you talk to some of the officers who are MPD officers, there are some interesting, there are issues where you might want to make the case that an officer might not want to be in the city, that may leave them vulnerable to retaliation for them being involved in a particular situation. But I don't think that's the case with firefighters. Firefighters are typically viewed as heroes and heroines, but we got to have them available to us to be able to have them perform those functions. James.
Mayor, you have here non-union D.C. government employees receive a 3% pay raise effective this month. What do you say to folks that this is really a cost of living adjustment or a cost of living increase instead of a real raise?
I say to people that somewhere between 4 and 7 years you haven't gotten a raise of any kind, cost of living or otherwise. So we're trying to reward our employees with additional dollars. I don't know whether it's a COLA. I'm not sure the cost of living has been 3% in recent years, but I call it a raise, James, and I call it righting an injustice that has been done over these last several years. And I want to echo the words of Geo Johnson. I think, and I don't want to speak for him because he speaks quite well for himself, but I think we view this as a raise. Alan?
Mayor, some of the unions that aren't included in these kinds of deals, the police union, the fire union, have said they don't think your administration is negotiating in good faith with them. We hear that rhetoric from them, but I have to ask, sir, do you believe that they're negotiating in good faith with the administration?
Well, I hope so, Alan. We are at various stages with some of the unions. Some have been at impasse, some are in arbitration, others are entering arbitration, some are continuing with negotiations, and I remain optimistic. I remain hopeful that we'll get to the finish line, with this process, and I hope that the labor leaders will work with us to make that happen. Mike?
Mr. Mayor, from the employee standpoint, obviously they're excited about the raises. From the management standpoint, were there any other things you can point to in these contracts that allow the city to manage the agencies better, improve services for residents, things like that?
I'm sure there are, but I'm not probably the best person to be able to address that. I'm going to ask Natasha if she would come up, because she's been involved in all these negotiations, and address that. Natasha.
I think generally these contracts are pretty solid. In some instances, we've negotiated provisions to provide more flexibility for management in scheduling. We've addressed some issues with seniority in as much as it is important, but it's only important to the extent that an employee is equally qualified for a promotion or for any type of personnel actions. We've also clarified language in the contract to outline clearly that it is a management right to conduct reductions in force, while the unions and the employees retain the right to engage in impact and effects bargaining once we make a decision that a reduction in force is appropriate.
You said more flexibility in scheduling.
Cut it off, please.
So you said more flexibility in scheduling leave. I just didn't.
In scheduling, for example, if there's just general scheduling, if there's an emergency and we need to have folks come back to work, stay at work longer, there's just generally more flexibility for management, providing that we have properly designated employees as emergency or essential. We've also clarified and clearly outlined that there's a zero tolerance policy in the district as it relates to workplace violence. We've outlined clear infractions for employees that transport our students to and from school, in as much as any type of breach of those infractions would result in immediate terminations.
Can you just clarify, besides the police, fire, and teachers, are there any other bargaining units that are yet to come to terms?
Currently, we've completed 8 collective bargaining agreements. We are still in negotiations with the police union, the fire union, the Council of School Officers, who represent the principals and assistant principals and related service providers at DCPS. We continue to negotiate with the doctors' unions and the nurses' union, and with AFSCME and Teamsters at DCPS. We will begin those negotiations in May.
WTU, is that still?
WTU is currently in negotiations.
Can you update us on where you are in the negotiations with fire and police?
Yeah, to the extent, I'm not directly involved in those, but there have been 6 mediation sessions that have been held with the firefighters. And they're now going to arbitration. I think all of those sessions were held during the month of April, weren't they, Natasha?
Correct. Most of them were held in April. A few were held in March. Sure. Like the mayor said, we. We completed the mediation process with the fire department. Like the mayor said, we had approximately 6 sessions. We're preparing for arbitration with the firefighters union. We started mediation on Monday with the police union, and we go back to mediation tomorrow with that union.
While you're there, please, could you give us just, I know you don't want to negotiate in public or in the press, but just, can you just give us some broad outline of what are the issues? Is there something other than pay? It must be other work-related issues.
I think, like you said, the negotiations are negotiated confidentially, but as with most contracts, clearly wages and benefits and scheduling and things like that are always usually on the table.
It's a big picture, not just 1 or 2 items?
There are more than 1 and 2 items in the impasse related to the police department and the fire department, yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I could follow up on this subject, there's been some feeling from some of the rank and file who've spoken to me that their personalities are involved, that the friction with Chief Ellerby for a variety of reasons, or the friction on the police side with the caustic Chris Bauman's comments about the administration have injected themselves into the negotiations and have slowed things down. And that the police would be better, somebody told me, that they had a different leader other than Chris Bauman. How personal is it?
No, it's not personal for us. This is business, and that's the way we are treating it. And if we have obviously no control over who the union leader is for the police officers. To go back to your point there, it's up to the police officers to make that decision, and they can choose to do what they wish.
I have a question for Mr. Johnson, if he would.
Okay.
I don't want to push you from the microphone again. Well, Mr. Johnson, we're into a political season. We're just less than a year away from the next mayoral race. You've had very strong words in support of the mayor. Put it on your political hat. Are you supporting the mayor? Should he run for re-election?
Yes, I would.
Other than him working hard with the unions, why?
Well, he's a straight shooter. And in this day and age, you deal with those who not only represent your interests, but the interests of those that you represent. And as you go down history sort of repeats itself. Those that have become incumbents and have won races in the past are those that service the people. That's why we would support it.
You care to broach the subject that was broached with Anita Bonds in this coming campaign?
Is this dealing with this? This is not dealing with that.
But go ahead, that's good. Thank you.
And I let Mr. Johnson go on with that because he was being such a positive force in his room.
It's getting to be intolerable. So. Other subjects?
Are you moving your pen around, Alan? Are you? Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if you wanted to be called upon. Yeah, and if it were, who would we'd be auctioning off, right? NBC4. All right. Any other questions on the contracts? If not, thank you all very much. And some of you may be called back up here, of course. Okay.
Right now, Mr. Mayor, up on the Hill, there's yet another security hiccup, concerns and some evacuation of parts of the Hart building, some concerns about letters. Just where are we today in the nation's capital as you understand it? What's happening on the Hill? What's going on?
Yeah, we were involved in this as of last night. I got an email immediately from Deputy Mayor Quander. Then I got 2 calls from our health director, Dr. Levin. And so, one, I'll start with a general statement. I think they're very much on top of it to the extent that we're involved in this. It seems to involve the federal government substantially. And I'll ask Deputy Mayor Quander if he would come up and give us as much as we can say about it at this stage. I think there have been 2 letters. Is that right?
What's happening on the Hill as far as you've been briefed?
As far as I am aware, there was a letter, multiple letters, at least 2. One sent to the Senate, one was sent to the White House, addressed to the President. Both matters were letters were received away from the District of Columbia in mail handling facilities. The Capitol Police and Secret Service and the FBI are involved in that investigation. They are trying to make sure that we have no other letters or suspicious envelopes in the Senate. That process is ongoing. They will provide additional information once it is available. We are in contact with them. They have been sharing information, as is our practice and pattern here in the District of Columbia. We are accustomed to dealing with issues like this, and so there's a protocol in place, and we're following that protocol.
Any impact on the District of Columbia government mail?
No, no impact on D.C. government mail at this time. We remain in a heightened state of awareness, and those protocols are being followed. Thank you.
Could you explain, could we follow up, could you explain for district residents, many who weren't here after 2001 and the anthrax attacks, how exactly is the mail sorted, what's going to Capitol Hill versus the average D.C. resident? How concerned should residents be about this?
There's a sorting process that the Postal Service has in place, and then there are heightened and additional layers that are set aside for U.S. government facilities, either Capitol Hill or the U.S. Attorney's Office or the White House. But there are procedures that the Postal Service has put into place since the anthrax events in 2001 that have been perfected and enhanced and built upon. So there's a screening process that goes forth. That's why sometimes we often get alerts early on when we get a positive screening. Oftentimes those positive screenings turn out to be, false positives. And that's why we do the initial screening, and then we send out the mail or the item for confirmatory testing. And so there's a process in place. It is working well. It is identifying suspicious envelopes and packages. And once that happens, then we implement our protocols and we follow through with it.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Mayor, there's an election on Tuesday, as you're fully aware. Who are you voting for?
One of the candidates on the ballot.
That includes Michael Brown.
Well, I said one of the candidates on the ballot.
Second, what do you feel about Anita Bonds, who's the former chairman of the Democratic State Committee, the incumbent council member? Many accuse her of injecting the race card. And her statement in radio interviews was that she's reflecting the majority population, African Americans, and thus that's an asset and people should vote that way. Do you think that's constructive, corrosive, or in any way a change in terms of the political dialogue of this city?
I think whatever any candidate says in a contest like this, people will have to evaluate that for themselves, Mark. And I'm not going to evaluate Councilmember Bonds' comments or anybody else's comments I didn't even hear the comments, so, it's probably right now, and I don't mean this negatively, but that's your interpretation, of what was said. So I didn't hear the comments. I'm not going to comment on it. But I've worked constructively with her, certainly since she's been on the council. And if she's elected or whoever's elected, I look forward to working constructively with them.
Question 8, how are you voting on that?
On what? Question 8? You mean around budget autonomy? You mean the desire, the fervent desire the District of Columbia has to be able to make decisions about our own money? Isn't it time that we have control of our money? Don't you think so, Mark?
Yeah, I surely do, but your remarks, and especially the Attorney General remarks from the sitting, in some ways showed a lack of enthusiasm for this.
See, that's why I'm reluctant to accept whatever comments you just made about Anita Bond, because that is a slant on it that doesn't really reflect. It's your interpretation. That's exactly right. Wait a minute. The Attorney General, and it was very clear in his position on the issue. He raised legal questions about it, and I said that I was dubious about it also. But in light of that, I signed the bill with enthusiasm, and frankly, I will be out there enthusiastically voting for this, because if it takes that to be able to get us, budget autonomy in the District of Columbia, I am going to support it heartily. I urge everybody to come out, because I think this will pass overwhelmingly, Mark. But I don't think that's just the issue for us. It's not just that we get 80% or 90% of the votes on this. It's having a lot of the people who live in the District of Columbia come out and make a statement that this is important to us. We can't control our own money, despite the fact that we have a fund balance of $1.5 billion. We have routinely balanced budgets. I think we are the envy of the nation in terms of our fiscal rigor, in terms of our current fiscal posture. I was at a panel this morning where people were commenting about the District of Columbia and where we are at this stage. So I want the people of this city to come out and vote for something like this, to say, of course we support budget autonomy, but we support it in large numbers, and we're going to fight until we get a chance to be able to have the ability to control our own money. And I hope, maybe this will get the attention of some lawmakers up there who may work with us to be able to get this done in a much more expedient, much more expedited fashion than otherwise might be the case.
It's necessary for you to have negotiations with Mr. Issa, or if there's going to be a legal challenge, you're going to defend the passage.
Yeah, first of all, I think I work very closely with Mr. Issa. I work very well with him. I've enjoyed my relationship with him.
Brought the subject up with you?
I've talked to him about budget autonomy, of course. And
this election, since this was put on the ballot.
Yeah, I've talked to him about this. I don't. He's not going to tell me what his position is, of course.
Angry or
no, I got it.
Disapprove the results. That's been done in one election.
Well, it could happen. But he didn't say he was going to do that. He didn't say he was going to stand up and overwhelmingly and enthusiastically embrace it either. But I think he is somebody who we can work with in order to be able to get to the finish line on this. Al?
Mayor, your
I would
administration...
love to be able to come to work the way you do. Look. Yeah.
I don't think there's a law preventing it.
There's not. But can you imagine? You'd be the first one to write about that. Mayor comes to work in shorts and tennis shoes.
Praise, I would say. Way to go. Mayor takes initiative. Your administration is set to sue 2 contractors on the who were involved in the Anacostia High School project. It's a civil RICO case, from what I understand. Which will the underlying case will show that there's a possible criminal activity. What's your reaction to the lawsuit, and then what's your reaction to the fact that this alleged fraud took place right under the nose of your city administrator and your director of Department of General Services?
Well, with respect to the legal issues, I'm going to ask our Attorney General if he would come up and address those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, I was here today because we've negotiated a successful collective bargaining agreement with our lawyers who are working very hard on a number of matters, and I'm really proud of our relationship with them and proud of the work that they do. But Alan, consistent with our policy, until and unless we file a lawsuit, we're not going to discuss what is under investigation. There's no question the matter that you raise is under investigation by our office, and when and if we do file a suit, then we will comment on it. I urge that there be no comments on the proposed or possible litigation until it's filed.
Given those comments, I think I will resist the opportunity to comment on the rest of your question. Ms. Brazil.
On this matter, Mr. Mayor, could you share with us what is the status of your efforts to reform and deal with the abuses in the CBE program? And I have in mind particularly a provision that you've included in the Budget Support Act that you've sent to the council, in which the one entity in the district government that is supposed to audit the CBE program, which is over at the D.C. Auditor's Office, in your Budget Support Act, you are removing it from the D.C. Auditor's Office and putting it back in, and putting it into the DSLBD office. So in essence, what you're saying is the CBE program, which the D.C. Auditor's Office audits, is going into the office that is supposed to be audited. But in a general way, could you give us an update on where things stand in terms of new legislation to reform the CBE program, this provision in your Budget Support Act, as well as have you identified a permanent replacement for Mr. Pettigrew, who was summarily dismissed a few weeks ago?
Well, I think you've asked three questions. Let me answer the last one first, and that is no, we're continuing to look for a replacement. Robert Summers is currently the acting. He was a deputy, right, Victor? He is a deputy, and he is acting in that capacity. Now, with respect to the budget, first of all, the auditor has the authority and ability to do anything that she wishes to do. This doesn't constrain the auditor from auditing DSLBD or anybody else. And what we did was, we did not reduce, we're not proposing to reduce the resources that are available to the auditor, because I was on the council when that was moved over there. There were 4 positions that I think are connected with that, and those positions are not being brought back to DSLBD. So the auditor will still have those positions. She has the full authority to be able to audit anything she wishes involving DSLBD, so in no way is the auditor constrained. We just believe from an administrative perspective that an administrator who doesn't have the ability to engage in compliance reviews really is absent a part of the responsibility of the office. That does not in any way, again, constrain anyone in the auditor's office from being able to conduct an audit of any facet of DSLBD. And then thirdly, we're continuing to work. I think the task force is meeting on, I think, is it a weekly basis they are meeting? And we expect in a matter of just a few weeks to be able to transmit a new and revised bill to the council for their consideration.
Follow up on that panel. Loretta Caldwell is a member. DOES has said they're investigating her company.
Alan, before you go into all that, because we went through this once before, they're advisory. They have no authority. They're advisory.
But you don't have any concern that Ms. Caldwell
remains on the panel? If I were you, I'd look at the product when it comes out and evaluate the product.
Well, the head of Leftwich and Ludaway and the head of McKissick and McKissick, who oversaw the school construction, which you're about to sue over, are also on this panel. So, I mean, does that not concern you?
Evaluate the product when it comes out. The product of this is not the task force. It is nothing but the bill that is crafted that will be transmitted to the council. And I'd invite you, and I know you will, to evaluate that product. We felt we had a good product before. We felt that it didn't reach far enough, as you know. That's why I chose to veto the. Wait a minute. Let me finish. Let me finish, Alan. May I finish? Would I? Well, I'm trying. The bill that we vetoed was one that we felt went into some areas that were not going to enhance the program. There were some of the things that we had proposed that were in there, but if you go back and read my letter, the idea was to be able to have a stronger CBE program at the end of the day. We didn't feel that would be the case, and that's what we're trying to do.
Mr. Mayor, if I could cut to the core, I think what D.C. residents and taxpayers are concerned about is yes, they're concerned about the fraud and the abuse and these fake joint ventures. But as a taxpayer, I'm concerned that these CBEs are costing taxpayers dollars. You have situations like the Washington Times reported where you have these companies that have these so-called DC offices that don't exist, that they are more or less pass-throughs, and they go to Staples, they buy some office supplies, they mark it up, and the district government buys it from them when we should be buying it from the original source. So are you concerned about the quality of the work, the cost of these projects? Anacostia High School is not completed. They're in there doing work still as we speak. Meanwhile, you attended a ribbon cutting. The Department of Employment Services that Forrester renovated. I mean, you go down to legislative services, and there are change orders as we speak for a building that opened more than 2 years ago because the work was not done right. Are you concerned about the cost that the CBE program has caused us, as well as the fact that you have perhaps pervasive fraud being committed on DC taxpayers?
Yes, I'm concerned about cost and quality.
Is that all you're going to say?
I answered your question. A lot of what you said was a statement, and I absolutely am concerned about cost and quality. If you go back to my letter that vetoed the legislation, one of the things I said is by increasing the threshold from 35 to 50%, that we were going to eliminate a lot of the competition, and therefore the costs were going to go up as a result of that.
In response to
Let me try somebody else, Ms. Brazil. Mark.
On another subject, on January 24th, Senator Carper introduced the D.C. State Agenda. Senator Reid said he would hold a floor vote on D.C. State Agenda, which would be historic. It's never been done. If it got out of committee. I came out and talked to you with Congresswoman Norton, and you did not ask Senator Carper whether he would hold hearings. I've just now heard yesterday that the ball really is Senator Begich of Alaska, the subcommittee chair, and will hold, and is the person responsible for holding the hearings. If you talk to Senator Begich, and second, if you haven't talked to him, will you talk to him and ask him to hold hearings very shortly?
I will talk to anybody who has a role to play in making a decision about the future governance model for the District of Columbia. As you know, as you've indicated, I met with Senator Carper. And if there is someone else in the Senate or in the House that we believe we should talk to move that ball down the field, I am absolutely more than happy to know that. And I hope that I didn't have to say that. I hope you already knew that, Mark. I will, yes.
But you didn't ask Carper about the hearings, so that's why the hearings are now been sent to the subcommittee chair. So I wanted to know whether you had talked to Baker. Were you even aware of that? I was not aware.
No, I was not. I will say this, though. I had a very constructive, along with Congresswoman Norton, very constructive conversation with Senator Carper. And he's someone who I think really understands the issues and someone who I look forward to working with. That's it. All right. Thank you all.